Today on Wellness Spring, I'm excited to introduce Andrew Meseha, the visionary founder of Happy Soils and the Agricultural Innovator of 2024, awarded by the Royal Agricultural Society of New South Wales. Andrew is revolutionising farming with his innovative organic fertilizers, biostimulants, and hemp cultivation methods. I was fortunate to visit Andrew at his factory and witness firsthand the incredible work happening behind the scenes. Happy Soils is leading the way in soil restoration and educating and assisting farmers on transitioning to regenerative farming practices step by step, while making a big impact on legislation and the future of agriculture. So let's dive into Andrew's story and his transformative work with Happy Soils. Welcome, Andrew, to Wellness Spring. It's so lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Anytime.
So could you please tell the listeners, what is Happy Soils?
Right, that's a big question. It's actually a really big question. Well, Happy Soils it's a biological stimulant range, but it's like no other. The range is based on using nature, as nature is the tool to fix all of our problems, both ecologically and environmentally. So Happy Soils is to be considered probably the world's first and only regenerative, organic, complete solution, and it's not going to cost farmers a bomb. In actual fact, it's far cheaper. So this is where the issue with biologicals and chemicals come into play, where in the past biologicals have been very expensive and not commercially viable, and a lot of them haven't worked. This range works.
Okay, and how long have you had this range? When did the company start?
So Happy Soils has been in the pipeline for about 5 years. We only actually started the company about a year ago. So we've been in the background trying to get the structure right for the last 5 years and dealing with the politics of it all and jurisdiction and the nightmare of dealing with regulators. And it's been now probably about a year and a half, and in that year we've won the Royal Agricultural Society of New South Wales Innovator of the Year award in soil excellence, and it's about to pop off.
Great. So when you said it works, how much proof have you got that it works?
We've got 25 years worth of data.
Right.
And case studies and reviews. So it's funny we're talking about this right now. I'm actually just uploading a whole bunch of case studies onto the website at the moment. But when I mean it works, I mean most biological products can work. Now the problem is with, say, bacteriums. Bacteria is a very difficult thing to manage, to bottle, and to keep alive in the bottle, even in a spore state. Most companies out there that are doing biological products say that they've got live beneficial bacteria in a liquid or a granule form, and more so liquid, and let's stick to liquid at the moment. Problem being is too much oxygen getting into the bottle because they cowboy it, basically just using a nozzle head, and once you interact oxygen with bacterium, you bring it to life. And the other thing is cross-contamination. Cross-contamination being one of the biggest issues. So every bottle that arrives, every plastic bottle that arrives, has got E. coli in it. And if you've got really good bacteria, it's going to cross-contaminate, it's going to activate it, and your bottles will start to blow out. And when I say our product works, it's the only range in the world that exposes the antagonist gene in the soil, and that's part of our IP. This type of range is what this technology is what was used in Chernobyl. So this is the technology that was used in Chernobyl with hemp to decontaminate Chernobyl.
Wow.
So you're talking about nuclear fallout, PFAS, everything from asbestos. So this isn't just a matter of the product works biologically to create nutrient in the soil. This is a converter. So we can convert toxic chemicals into amino acids, proteins and carbohydrates for plants to uptake as nutrient. And at the same time, detox and regenerate the soil. So we do have a plethora of case studies, biological reports, and it's really interesting. We're talking about this, but you get a lot of soil testing groups, even like Schwepp, that, you know, I won't mention names, but soil testing facilities that always ask us, why do you guys want that particular variant or that particular test? No one's ever asked us for that. Because we're not looking at chemical, we're looking at the biology of it, especially with hydrogen levels in the soil. That's where we can see where your CFU counts are going to be. So a lot of farmers are screwed into doing the same program. The agronomist goes through, puts it into a computer, says these are the figures, and it spits out what they need. But it's all chemical based: lime, super, urea, this, that. And what happens when, say, the dairy farmer uses urea or lime or glyphosates, which will go, I don't like talking about glyphosates because I don't think they belong in the soil at all. What happens is urea denatures the soil, creates instability in the structure. It's like completely dehydrating your body. And then what happens from there is, as soon as you start to dehydrate the soil, there's no activity in the soil. But what it does is it sucks the nutrient density out. So you might get nice big grass for a couple of seasons from using urea. A lot of dairy farmers use urea. But your nutrient density is gone. There's no nutrient left in the soil. So what we do is we bricks test. Every farmer should have a bricks test meter. It costs about $25. I've got one right here, I'll show you it in a moment. But what they should have is a bricks test meter. And they can rip up a piece of grass or their fruit or their veg, dilute it into some water, or just even just grab it and just smash it down and put it into the bricks meter. And that bricks meter will evaluate the nutrient density. So, you know, we talk about Coles, Woolworths, how they're screwing over farmers. How are they doing that? They go onto your farm, they run a bricks test. You're expected, you're thinking, off this hectare, I'm going to make $40,000 off this hectare today. Or my entire yield is going to be worth 250 grand. What happens is they come on, they check the density of it, the nutrient value, it's low nutrient dense. So they go, we'll offer you 125. So now the farmer's 50K in the red when he's paid another 25% addition on the chemicals, because they're all chemical fertilizers that have gone through the roof. So what we're able to do is convert and utilize 40, 50, 60 years of lockup in that soil, where we can convert it very, very quickly. And we're not against particular, you know, chemicals or mineral. We know there has to be some mineral in the soil. But the overusage is because farmers are desperate. You know, I need more feed, or I need more hay, I need more grasses, I need, you know, more lucerne for my farms and my cows and my horses. And you know, at some stage, if you guys have got time, I'll take you up to Bloomfield Farm, where you can speak to one of my farmers directly, who's been on the program now for the last 12 weeks, and you can't believe it. He's shocked. So his bricks meter went from 2.5 to 7.5 already. We've got to get it to about 15 to 25, so he never has to buy any more hay.
Yeah, so what is the normal level? Is it 15 to 25 for nutrient density?
healthy farm should have between 15 and 25. Anything under that in terms of nutrient density is a problem. And it depends. If you're saying fruit, veg, some things that won't go past 10.5, won't go past 9.5.
Could you explain what is a Brix test?
Sure. So a Brix test is what you call a refractometer. So basically it measures the nutrient level of food, your fruit, your veg, as well as your grasses. And what happens is you grab, say, a piece of, say, a grape, for example. They break it down, you put the juice on it, and you shut that off. And then all you have to do is look in this, and it will give you the actual reading. So that little meter that you're going to see in there goes up and down, right? So depending on the nutrient density in there, we'll be able to tell how much nutrient is in that food. And this is the thing, we're talking about quality and quantity. You can have both, but you've got to get your biology right in the soil. So that's what this range does. It's a converter. It's a conversion machine. And we're basically switching on what's been switched off in the soil over the last 40, 50 years of this modern agricultural experiment. So yeah.
And you talked earlier about costs, because you said, it's expensive to pay for the chemicals. How much per hectare, for example, would it cost to use your product?
So let me put it into perspective. Most farmers are currently spending between $1,500, sometimes $3,000 a hectare. Heavy intensive work. They're putting gyprock down, they're putting all sorts of lime down, and you're looking at not just the $1,500 to $3,000 of costs there, but you're also looking at the fact that there's labour. It's labour intensive. Our programs will run between $150 to $200 a hectare, and that's your entire cycle, your crop cycle. But then it gets really interesting, because your first year, your costs are about the same. The second year, you see a bit of a drop in your yields. But then the third year, everything picks up again. Now what happens in the second year is, after the soil has utilised all the chemical, it goes into a phase of detox, so you need a little bit of mineral. So your yields aren't as heavy, but what will happen is you'll still get really good quality out of those yields, but your output's not going to be as much, because that second year is when all the activity's happening. It's the phase out between your soil being unhealthy, completely clogged up. It's like when you do a detox. What happens when you do a detox of your body? You come up with your pimples and all the shit comes up, right? It's the same thing. The second year is a detox phase. Third year is your replenishment. So it's like, okay, I'm past the detox now. Now I've got to fix my microbiomes and my enzymes and everything internally. So I need to continue consuming good food. Fourth year, your immune system's strong. By the fifth year, you maintain it, and you don't need anything. It's a healthy body. It's a healthy organism. That's the same thing. By the fifth year, you're no longer using any of our products or anyone else's products.
Well, that's very good.
So you're talking about $150 down up to about $200. Third year, about $150 at $200. Fourth year, dropped down about $75. Fifth year, using $15, $20 a hectare. Complement that with hemp, you can fast track that process to about 2 years instead of 5.
So how does that work? The farmer has to grow hemp or use
Crop
it as
cycle.
mulch?
There's one or two ways here. At the moment, with the actual national regulation on it is that it's still under the Drug Enforcement Code. I've been working tirelessly right now with our political establishment here in Victoria and somewhat in New South Wales and federally on deregulation. I'm pushing for deregulation. It's not happening. We're not going to get deregulation, but we are going to get a hemp bill that will remove hemp from the drug code. Part of the reason why we're not getting investment in hemp is because it is in a drug code. So how is a bank going to fund you against your farm to be growing hemp when they're not allowed to? They can't do it. So what we need to do is now is to get it to a point where we're almost there, where you're talking about, say a farmer's on 500 hectares, and I'll do the maths for you now because we know exactly what the figures are because we do the modelling every day. So if you're a farmer who's on 500 hectares and you're growing hemp, even if you do one crop cycle or two crop cycles a year, what happens is hemp is a natural detoxer of your soil. It works 3 times more effectively than any other plant in the world. It's what you call the remediation process. That's why the Soviet Union or Russia at the time used hemp to essentially decontaminate Chernobyl. So the actual DNA of this plant and how it works, I think I call it God's gift to the planet. And it's one of the only plants that can't be genetically modified very easily at all. So it's got what we call genetic elasticity. It remembers its gene code. So it bounces back to its original gene code. They can try. What happens is you end up with a very weak plant. Very, very weak plant. And as soon as you try to take the psychedelic components out of hemp, like THC, what you end up with is with a plant that can barely germinate because it needs some of the psychedelic THC componentry in it. That's what gives it its strength. So hemp is a very, very quick way of dealing with soil problems, and if a farmer's looking at it going, that's 3 months of my year, it's about money as well. If farmers are struggling, we'll purchase. We'll give them a guaranteed purchase agreement, provisional of them using the products and doing the soil tests. We can make sure that we're going to get the high quality yields that we want out of that crop, so then we can take it into processing and use it for hex core. So we're essentially establishing an industry in this country that actually has never been done anywhere. Globally, it's about time Australia stepped up, and we're a lazy bunch of pricks. We wait for the Americans to do it, we wait for every other country to do. And we've got the lowest research and development budget in the whole Western world, 1.2%. The lowest is, the highest being Japan and Singapore and South Korea, with us being the worst in all the OECD nations. So we're a lazy bunch. And this is where we're looking at it going, well, the private sector needs to do it. If the government's not going to do it and universities aren't going to do it properly, then we've got to do it ourselves. And we've done it. We've done it and we've proven the case. So if you've ever been out to Lardner Park, we ran a hemp trial there that was on the news and Win TV, and 2 hectares of land up there, the Farm World Expo. That was primarily a car park for the trucks. And we turned it into a hemp plantation almost out of season, late in the season, using happy soils. And you could really see the structural difference in the plant between the plot that was with happy soils and the plot that was without. And what you'll see here, there's a comparison between the use of happy soils and the use without happy soils. And you can see the root system and the mycelium formation, which is carbon. So when you combine those two together, we're talking about a drawdown rate of about 100 to 150 tonnes per hectare every 100 days. It's enormous, and that's what we're looking at is carbon banking, because that's where the carbon belongs, and that's how you build topsoil. So your question about how does that work? It's basically a big ass straw that's sucking down the carbon and creating CEC, which is your carbon cation exchange, to generate aeration in the soil. Once you create that aeration in the soil, you can then start creating that sponge effect, which then absorbs more water, so you use less water, less chemicals. You're creating more biodiversity now in the soil, and that's when you get your worms start coming back, and your nematodes and your fungus and your bacteria, and they all work together to start colonizing CFU, which is your colony forming units of bacteria. Then once you put in your happy soils bacterium, you're colonizing for the next 76 days. Most products work for 72 hours. Our products will continue to create CFUs for 76 days, which is why you only use it twice in your crop cycle. Once at the beginning of the crop, once in the middle. Most people don't even get to using the crop, the actual products at the end, because their crops have gone berserk.
Right, and I know you've got a few different happy soils ingredients or products.
Yep.
How do you know which one? Do you use the same on every land?
No, it all depends. Now, this is where we have a base program, which is your activate first or your grow and bloom, depending, which then goes into your next part of it, which is your either your heal and shield or your energize, depending. So if we look at the soil test and you've got really low hydrogen levels and you've got basically zero biological activity going on in there, which we see it a lot. We can show you some tests now where there's almost zero organic matter in there. What we do is we run your activate first, which essentially opens up your soil aggregates. The communication pathway starts to reform the aggregates because it needs to travel somewhere. From there, you'd use either heal or shield, depending on the condition of the soil, or energize. But the majority of the time we'll go activate, energize, which is your biostimulant, and then you heal and shield either liquid or granule, depending on the condition of the soil. We don't use your granule. What farmers should never do, and I'll say this openly now, don't ever apply granule products during winter. Because it's just going to go into a spore state, especially bacteria, if it's too cold. So if you're going to use anything, use a light liquid, but don't listen to what the agronomists are telling you and dump granules everywhere, because you're wasting your money. Everything will go into a spore state. So, yeah.
So how do people apply happy soils?
Sorry, what you're saying is via boom or spray, like you would with any other chemical. Right. The range is to be used in the same formation, and I'll send you guys the farmers application rates and usage guide, how to actually use it. It's all the same. Everything will be the same. If you're using boom sprayer, using a hand sprayer, you're using an actual sprayer itself, the big irrigation systems, it would be the same as applying, say, your NPKs. And we're not against using NPKs at all. We're not against using any of your programs, especially with farmers who like using conventional products. How this range works is, even if you're using conventional products, you can utilize 100% now of that energy and of that chemical and form it into nutrient all year round. So what we're doing is we're trying to reduce your inputs and your input costs instead of changing your whole mentality of trying to shift over into this. There has to be a blend. There's got to be a middle ground between conventional and regenerative at the moment. So it's what we call your holistic program, especially for the older farmers.
Yeah, well, a lot of people that we've spoken to, especially farmers and scientists, they talk about biodiversity, And how do you achieve that?
Your biodiversity, that's a big, let me tell you why it's a big question. I ran a case recently over a biodiversity issue. Just down the road from here, actually, in Warrandyte. I can talk about it now because it's all been released publicly. Our government is what we've got here is what you call the Biodiversity Act in Victoria. New South Wales has got its own, every state's got its own Biodiversity Act. And under that act, they've got their endangered species listing. They've got your general habitat units and your endangered species units in there. Everything that we're currently using is what we call predictive modelling. They don't actually know what biodiversity has been around up until probably the early 2000s when we started to monitor that. Before that, it was a free-for-all. The problem that we have with biodiversity is we don't have a biodiversity problem. We've got an ecological destruction problem. So when you destroy entire ecosystems and habitats, so say for example, up in the Highland regions, where they're sweeping through, destroying entire native habitat units, or sections of our great forest, native tidal forest. What you do is you actually cause that biodiversity issue to run downstream. And that's how you create fires. Because when you kill off local rain cycles, so it's called a rainforest, kill off local rain cycles, what happens? There's no humidity. The trees are what cause humidity, precipitation, clouds. You break that apart, and what happens is you're going to have serious fluctuations in weather, heat and cold. So you change microclimates everywhere. You end up changing the entire macroclimate. You have fires, which then cause more biodiversity issues. So if you're talking about biodiversity in the soil, the best way to reboot that is by a combination of holistic approaches, which is also having your animals rotated, having plots. They graze on this part for a while. You need the animals to be shitting on your farm. You know, they talk about cows being the problem. Cows aren't the problem. Cows, it's where the cows are at is the problem. The cows should be on there because once they shit on your soil, they're actually creating what Activate does, which is like a glad-rope effect on the soil, keeping the carbon in there. And that's how you create more biodiversity within the soil. And if they're going to be running canola, the problem is broadacre monocropping as well. You add that with, you then add chemicals. There's no biodiversity left in that soil. It turns into, basically, you're desertifying it, turn into powder, which is where shepherding's going right now. You go up there, you grab some soil, it's powder. There's nothing left in it. So your biodiversity methods have to be a mixture of your products, your plant selection, and why would you want to monocrop anyway? It's all about biodiversity in your soil, but what about biodiversity in your portfolio and your bank account? Like stock traders don't just purchase one stock. They purchase multiple stocks to create a variation. So if one crop, say for example wheat, drops in price and you're growing wheat, you've got other plants and other commodity that it's growing, so you can offset that drop. So how I say to farmers is stop being lazy. Don't go into monocropping. If you're monocropping now, you want to add biodiversity, so your crop rotations with another crop then. Use hemp if you need to. Get a license just to do your crop rotation and then compost it back into the soil. The licenses are free now, so you might as well get one so you can actually crop it, mulch it back in, and move on. That's how you create your biodiversity.
Right. And you talked about costs. Do you provide finance?
Depends. We'll provide long-term costing, so long-term agreements, so long-term terms. So if a farmer's really struggling, we will give him 3 months. Usually that's a crop cycle to pay, so we'll give you 90-day terms. And once the crop's out of the ground and they've sold it, then they can pay us. With hemp, it's very different. With hemp, we'll give you an off-take agreement and the seed and your initial nutrient, which is your Happy Soils range, and then we'll take that out of the cost of us purchasing it from you at the end of it. So that becomes part of the deduction of us purchasing. So if we're going to buy it off you for $550 or $600 a tonne, we might have paid $100 per tonne out of our pocket for your seed and your nutrient. We'll take that off the tonne price for at least the first yields until you've got your own cash flow happening. So it all depends on what the farmer's dealing with.
Okay. And you talked about HexCore. Do you want to tell the listeners what that is?
So HexCore is our partner in, they are the world leaders, essentially, I tend to think. They're the world leaders in hemp manufacturing, the future of industry in this country, and actually globally. There'll be a global footprint of them soon. You can see that happening. HexCore do everything from hemp, timber, tables, chairs, probably would have seen that at the Royal Easter Show, panels, boarding, so instead of concrete walls like this, we'll be using them with hemp. They're innovators in their own right. We've got a big manufacturing facility out in Pakenham, which hopefully soon is much bigger. Great crew, very smart in what they do, but they're entirely focused on 100% hemp manufacturing, which means now farmers have an ability to have an off-taker. Someone who's going to buy it. Farmers are worried right now is, oh cool, I'll grow hemp, but who's going to buy it from me? We'll be the ones purchasing it under an agreement and guaranteeing the purchase.
That's great. Some farmers I've spoken with have said to me, because obviously looking for land and we're going to build, cabins and beautiful things at the show. Adam showed us these beautiful spa things made of hemp. And they're like, no, don't go there because the animals are going to eat them.
No chance. Animals, firstly, termites hate hemp. They hate the taste of it. They won't touch it. I can take you to HexCore to go and have a look right now in terms of, the fire trial that was done. Houses are being built out of hemp. It's costing them money at the moment where it shouldn't be. Where we've managed to create the commercial gain of it now. So where you're talking about, is it commercially viable instead of timber, bricks, lumber? Yeah, it is. It's actually about 30 to 40% cheaper. And you're talking about 26 to 28 degrees constant temperature in your home. You never have to turn on your aircon or heater again. But the animals aren't going to eat it. It's nonsense. It doesn't work that way, especially once it's pressed at 3,000 degrees. You're not going to, it's impossible. If you can't burn through it, how the hell is an animal going to eat it? So pound for pound, hemp's 10 times stronger than steel.
And you mentioned it's fire resistant, so I guess with all the fires in the countryside, Australia, with all the houses burning down, this would be a good option to build.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because at the time when we were at the show, HexCore down here, we were doing the trial with the CSIRO on a hemp container. So it was at 3,000 degrees and for half an hour. And the hottest it got inside the container was 26 degrees. The actual steel paling that was holding them together, that actually buckled, and the hemp didn't buckle at all. So the handle was still the handle was 26 degrees, the inside didn't get over 30, over 31 I think it was, or 28. So there's a lot of promise in it, but the fire resistance aspect of it is marginal. It almost becomes irrelevant. It's how quick can we produce it? How cost effective is it? What's the downstream supply chain going to look like economically? What type of jobs is it going to create? What type of impact is it going to have on our ecosystems and our ecology? And I'm currently working on the hemp decortication rollout program, full report of how we're doing it. No one's put the costings together except us, from end to end, from seed all the way through to final products. We'd be talking about a supply chain of, in the first year, if we were on at 8,600 hectares alone, out of one decorticator, we would be generating $350 to $400 million just off one decorticator. Now, call it 1 million acres or 1 million hectares. You do the maths on that. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry with a carbon offset of, I think it was 1.2 billion tons, 1.3 billion tons. It's enormous amounts. So I don't really look at the fire resistance side of it. I look at the money, the economic side of it, even though I'm not necessarily about the money. It's what drives the world, and it's where you get political change. All the other stuff's fluffy to me. You've got to look at how it's going to impact our economy, our jobs, and our commitments internationally, which I think are ridiculous anyway.
And also with hemp, and all the farmers talk about soil health equals human health, and you can buy like hemp seeds for your diet and hemp flour. So can you tell the listeners the difference between hemp and marijuana, because you mentioned TSH?
Yeah, so there's a big difference here. Hemp is a CBD based, so high CBD content, low THC. Cannabis, in terms of marijuana itself, is higher THC componentry to it, and that's the smokable stuff. We don't even grow hemp to the point of it going into seed. We don't want it to flower. We want to get it to the point where it's stalky, it's big, and then we cut it, right? So with cannabis, you can't use the hemp, the actual stalks, because they hollow out too much, and there's nothing left, because all the density, the energy goes to the bud, because you're trying to grow cannabis. Hemp is very different in terms of its industrial structure, and it's same family, just different player in the game. So you could have two brothers who one's very sporty and one's very lazy. Call cannabis the lazy brother, and hemp is the sporty one on the other side. So in terms of difference, how you can tell the difference between a hemp plant and a cannabis plant, most cannabis plants will have, when you look at the stalk, they'll have two what we call your flowering, I don't know what they call, like whiskers on each side of the leaf. So two on each. Hemp will only have one. So female, male as well. And if there's a difference between your male and your females as well. So with cannabis, they're looking for two on each side of the stalk the whole way through. Male ones, you'll find one. With hemp, you'll usually just find one. Right? So that's the big difference. And people wonder why hemp was outlawed, or cannabis was outlawed in the first place. It's dangerous, it's the devil's drug. No, it's not. In actual fact, because they can't make money off it. But at the end of the day, is they made it illegal in the 40s and 50s, call it 60s, during the UN, with that drug bill that went through the UN. Everyone thinks it was because of cannabis. It was actually because of hemp. That's why they outlawed it, because it competes with cotton, petroleum-based industries, biofuels. And at the time, we had this new fossil industry out of war that we had to manufacture and make into something. So they made it illegal, so it didn't compete. And this is the consequences of what we're facing now environmentally because of it.
Right, and I believe you've been doing a lot of work with Parliament to legalise it.
Yeah, it should be. It's ridiculous. So, I've done a lot of work in there. You could jump onto the hemp industry, the industrial hemp inquiry that was done, that we had in Parliament back in, I think it was August last year. And you can see the transcripts there and download. And there's been a lot of momentum now, and it's unfortunate that we've had so much political riff over it from the Conservatives as well. Which is, we shouldn't really be. It's now they're starting to understand. So I'd be surprised if the bill doesn't pass now, even though it's provisionally passed. If it doesn't pass, I'd be wondering why, and it would mean that there's a couple of companies that would benefit from us not having an industrial hemp industry, and it's protectionism of those fossilised old industries. So yes, I do a lot of work in Parliament. I've been doing a lot of work with politicians on it, a lot of advocacy work. It's the only thing that's going to pull this country out of an economic, environmental and ecological collapse. The only thing. There's nothing else.
Wow, that's huge.
And I bet my firstborn child on it, because we've checked every way of trying to fix the economic output of this country, especially the state here. So, we've got shortages in lumber, paper, bricks. We've got shortages in our energy costs have gone through the roof. We've got problems everywhere.
Yeah.
Hemp's the only thing that's going to be able to hit carbon without us having enormous energy costs, without hitting us with a carbon tax, without destroying our entire system as it is. And the idea of just getting rid of coal is absurdity. I think it's the most retarded thing that we could be doing as a country. And I'm not sure if anyone watched Tucker Carlson, his speech a couple of months ago when he was here. That's something else that we'll discuss in the next part of the session. That's all I'm going to go through.
Yeah, and deforestation, that's always in the news.
Deforestation, good old deforestation. So if you want to talk about deforestation, what part of it? Which part? In Victoria, New South Wales, like where? You want to look at?
Well, I think we should look at Victoria, since we're in Victoria. And when you talked about the energy drive-in here from New South Wales yesterday, we noticed all the solar farms that go on for miles and miles. And then you see the wind turbines that are standing still, cloudy skies, and, we believe that a lot of people are back using coal because you can't create the energy.
All you simply have to do to see what the hell's going on. So we use Amber. We use an app called Amber at home. Look at this. Look at this. So in terms of carry on with your normal usage of your electricity right now, right? It's around average. But what happens is around here, it's all coal. So the prices go up. They might be cheap, or they'll tell you it's cheap right now, but they're using dirty coal. We simply don't have enough. We simply don't have enough technology to be able to formalise something like that, which is actually why we should be looking at, and I hate to say it, nuclear power as well. If you want the cleanest and most efficient way of dealing with long-term energy sustainability, nuclear power is the best way to actually do it. It might take 25 years to do, but at least the stability of our future generations will be there. But nuclear power is by far the cleanest, and the only reason it's got such a bad stigma to it is the same thing as hemp and cannabis.
Yeah, it's only got a bad reputation because of the nuclear bombs.
Because of nuclear bombs.
Yeah.
But it's like, you can turn anything into anything bad.
Yeah.
I could turn salt into a car bomb if you wanted, if you wanted to. Sulfur.
Yeah, phosphate.
Phosphate. You could use anything like that. Exactly, that's what fertilizers can do. You use them in bombs. But in terms of nuclear power and nuclear generation, I think we are. He is right. in terms of what Dutton is saying at the moment.
It's the only way for the long-term future.
The problem is, how do you get that through the skulls of young people who have been indoctrinated to think that the only thing that we can do is wind turbines and all the fluffy shit? It's never going to work that way. Why don't we use coal?
I don't think it's the young people the problem. I think it's the old politicians and the older generation who were around during that nuclear proliferation treaty system. The 70s,
Perhaps.
the 70s, greeny, we have to disarm, we have to do this, we have to do that, and they've put it all into the one basket and said...
Just like I did with cannabis and hemp. But it's, nuclear energy is surprisingly the most sustainable way of generating energy.
And I can't see...
Zero emissions.
I can't see the logic of saying the climate is becoming less predictable, it's becoming more unstable, so we're going to use the climate to fix all our energy problems.
It's nonsense. It's never going to work. And the thing is, the narrative around climate change, we don't have a carbon problem. I keep saying this, we don't have a carbon problem. We have a nitrous oxide problem. We've got too much nitrous oxide in the atmosphere. Nitrous oxide is 300 times worse than carbon in the atmosphere. It's what you call, it's what you call the ozone killer. Lasts for 300 years in the atmosphere, or 150 years. And that's primarily caused by pesticides and herbicides, heavy metal inputs into the soil. So that's the core of the problem. Why aren't we addressing that as being the core of the problem? Why? I asked you that question, why? Why do you think that is? Why don't we talk about the core of the problem, being those chemicals?
Because the agricultural industry is too big and powerful.
Because the very lobbyists that lobby into our government are the very same people, and you can look this up on democracyforsale.net, and you can see the entire donor list of every political party and who's donating into them. You look at the Nationals, for example, it's always DuPont, Bayer, CropLife, New Farm. They're the biggest donors. So when we talk about agricultural policy, we talk about environmental policy, carbon. The real problem is down here in the soil. It's not what our miners are doing really, even though they're doing me. But emissions of carbon dioxide isn't a problem. Even methane to an extent isn't as bad. But why would you want to kill our cows? Put restrictions on our cows? Well, they're pumping out billions of tons of methane. Got to find balance.
So what we talked about earlier with all the pioneers for regen farming, like Peter Andrews, Charlie Massey and so forth, they've all been stating this for donkey's years but not getting the results. So because you're an out-of-the-box thinker, which is what I believe, how do you think, because there's so many incredible farmers, how can they come together as one voice? Like, are we able to make a change in Parliament, or how can we bring a change about? Because we've got all these companies who are big and powerful, which will be putting the brakes on. How do we get around this?
Hemp. Hemp is the quickest way to relieve our farmers. That's why I've been pushing for it. Sooner farmers get hemp into their soil, the sooner we can purchase it off them. So if farmers got, call it. So 1 hectare of hemp, approximately on average, generate about 16 tonnes of fibre every 120 days. 16 tonnes at $600 a tonne. You do the maths. It's $12,500, $13,000 every 100 days. You run that over 500 hectares and look at what the price is on that, look at what the farmer would be making. In millions of dollars. Millions. And it's every 100 days. All you need is a couple of crop cycles in 1 or 2. Get them out of debt. As soon as they're out of debt with the agricultural companies, unshackled. But in saying that, I think there does need to be a lot more action in terms of protecting our farmers. and the protection of it. And farmers don't help themselves either.
Well, I think
because they don't communicate with each other. The farmer next door, I speak to farmers about this all the time. I'm like, you're using our program, what's your next door neighbour doing? I don't know. I'm like, why don't you tell them? If they're struggling, why don't you tell them what you're using to fix your soil? But I want to buy their farm. You're not going to buy their farm. Nutrient's going to come in, or one of the companies that they owe money to, they're going to come in, foreclose on them, they're going to put it for sale and not sell it to you, you idiot. Then a corporation's going to come in and buy it from you, or a property developer, one of the big. You're going to be further marginalised. Farmers need to communicate. Your neighbour's not your enemy. That's why I look at it from a biblical point of view. Love thy neighbour. Because you need them. That's the only way we're going to have a strong nation is independent farmers. So if farmers are really, really struggling, like I recently had a farmer out in Bacchus Marsh who almost lost her farm to a developer. 3-year terms on settlement, the purchase of the property. Then he tried to screw it with a really complicated case. Turns out it was her lawyer that actually screwed up and released her the money out of the deposit, which is a significant amount of money. But he called them what he called 29-0 under the Land Title Act. And the contract of that act means that if anyone pays more than 20% deposit over a terms contract, they can recall it. They should only be paying 10%. So he paid 20% on the provision that he knew that he'd be able to recall that money in. So he tried to squeeze her on longer terms, 5 year, another 5 years, and kept delaying payment while she's paying the mortgage and she's paying everything, and she was almost bankrupt. Her lawyer then issued out a contract of termination that she could keep the deposit because he's actually defaulted numerous times, so you can't call it in a 29-0, and gave her the money from a deposit that was held in trust. She used that money, paid her debts down, blah, 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 then he tried to take her to court. So this is the game that we're dealing with, and a lot of farmers get put through this, but she was lucky she contacted me and I was able to fight the case for it. It took a lot of effort out of me, but we fought the case, and we won. So farmers that are really struggling like that, they can come to us. There's plenty of groups that will help, but they just need to put their egos aside. They need to know that there is help out there. They're not alone. Which is why we have the highest suicide rates in the country of farmers. Why? A farmer shouldn't be dying. A farmer should be driving around in Rolls Royces. It should be a gravy train out of their farm gate. Like, what are we doing?
So why do you think they're suiciding? Because they can't pay, there's too much pressure and can't pay their bills?
It's a number of things. Firstly, isolation is a very difficult thing to deal with. Then you've got your next door neighbour probably hates you. Your wife's pissed off at you because you're in debt. Your kids have moved off the farm because they can't see any prospect of intergenerational farming. So, and the majority of them are men who are killing themselves. So, what happens when a man's got nothing to live for? He's bankrupt. And he's got no one to speak to. The bank's up his ass. His wife won't talk to him. He's lost his family. And now he's going to lose his farm. And some of these farmers are intergenerational. They've been there for 200 years. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my dad's farm. This has been in the family for 200 years. I'd rather die than deal with that shame. That's where we're at.
Wow. And you mentioned communication. You know, how can we communicate with these farmers?
Look, there's plenty of ways in terms of, there's a lot of networks, a lot of groups at the moment, a lot of networks going on, but I've been calling for a green army since COVID, saying stop fighting in the street. You want to see real freedom, go help your farmers. Move your stock, help them, you know, like during COVID we had food shortages because we couldn't get people out to farms to pick. Because we couldn't get the foreigners in to do it. What's wrong with this country? What the fuck's wrong with our kids? If I was a parent at that point, I'd go, get your ass up. You're 18? You're not staying home. You're going to go help that farmer. Yeah, they might pay you, but you're going to go help. You're going to go work. You're not going to sit on your ass here. If I can get you an exemption to go do work at a farm, you're going to go work on the farm. So that's why I think we've become too soft. And our kids are disconnected. We've got a generation of delinquents, self-entitled delinquents. And that's the truth. And I'll say that openly, I say it all the time. So we have a degenerate generation of people that are coming up who are incapable of feeding themselves, taking care of themselves, growing anything. And if you don't appreciate where your food comes from, then you don't appreciate our farmers, which means they'll be gone.
People don't respect farmers, and people don't understand. No farmers, no food, no humanity.
Yep. But yet our farmers are the most vilified because of the cows and this. And it's like, what are you doing? No, they might have caused some of the issues or been indoctrinated into doing the wrong thing, which is where the chemical companies come in. They don't know that by pumping in all this stuff, they're killing off their soil. They don't know that. They've had 50 years of this. I've got to use this, I've got to use that, I've got to use this. That's what I've been told by my agronomist. Who's paying your agronomist? Who's sponsoring that agronomist? So it goes all the way through the chain. And the only way to get out of it for farmers is to cut their costs. If they cut their costs, they cut their yields. And then they're being targeted from who would want to be a farmer? But then you see what's going on with our regenerative farmers, our biodynamic farmers. They're happy. They're smiling, they're happy. The key is there is a transition period between conventional and being holistically managed and not having to put in 45% of your cost of goods going into chemicals. And that difference is that there's a transition period and farmers don't have time for that transition period. Talk about how this all works. This is what I call the methadone program for the heroin addict. Right? You can't just take a heroin addict straight off heroin. Like we lost one of our cousins 6 months ago to heroin. 25 years heroin addict. Made me realise what was going on. Made me think of the soil. He was in a detox phase after 25 years after having a heart attack, and it was just too much, he died. Which made me think of the soil as like, you can always bring the soil back to life. You can't bring humans back to life. And so this is the methadone program that doesn't impact your ability to function, your farm, until you're completely clean and you're no longer an addict. So that's the trick, it's the bridging period. And if you can breach that bridging period, everything's fine for farmers.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest arguments that a lot of people have is that,
well, how am I going to do that?
How am I going to pay for everything while we're transitioning? My farm's going to be less.
It's going to cost you less.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
But if you've got 40% less cost, then you only got to produce 40%, 60% of what you normally produce to create the same amount of. But then the supermarkets will say you can't produce enough for me, so I'm going to go somewhere else, and then so it becomes. The
great thing about the program is as soon as you pump it in, right, you can use it at the same time. All you're doing is you're detoxing and converting all those chemicals. You're going to get a massive boost. And you're already immediately reducing 35% of your inputs without having to do anything, and your yields will change, your nutrient density will change, everything changes very, very quickly. So.
And who is behind the recipes for all this?
I'd rather not say his name publicly, but he's a gentleman who has been, sorry, I'm used to holding my vape in my hand for some reason. I'll hold this instead. He's a gentleman who has been in the industry for a very long time in terms of biological industry. He's a soil microbiologist, 30 years, ex-dairy farmer as well. It's got a lot of connections and reach into the scientific world in Russia and China as well. So whether you like it or not, some of the best microbiologists and scientists and science and innovation is coming in out of China and Russia.
Yeah.
It's really bizarre because we're supposed to be the innovators, the Western world, but the best products that are coming out, we're not even getting a glimpse of it. The Chinese are using them in their own country. We're not getting them here. But this range was developed and created by a couple of different people working together, with the head microbiologist being here in Victoria and in Mafra, an ex-dairy farm for 25 years, and microbiologist who studied and lectured at the Nanjing University of Soil in China. So his name's Norman.
Good Chinese.
That's about all I can say. Norman.
Well done, Norman.
But you'll meet him eventually online, and what we do with him is, if you want to see him, he's on our Instagram. He's spoken a couple of times about farmers, and there was a couple of interviews that we did with the Australian Federation Party where he was on, but I try to keep him at distance so we don't threaten his life and so on.
What is your background? What motivated or inspired you to start this business?
I started Urban Green Farms, my first company, which is in hydroponics and aquaponics, and it was to be able to teach people how to grow food in the event of economic collapse. Call it a doomsday prepping mentality. I started to think since 2008 we're going downhill from here. This entire system's going to fall on its head, and I studied history really closely, and the further you look into history, the further you can see into the future. We're basically the Roman Empire and the Ottoman Empire and every empire that's ever collapsed on steroids now. We've gone down the same path, and my thing was, what are the key things that people need during those times? And that's self-determination, their own food production, and that's why I started Urban Green Farms. I think at the very DNA of it is, I started Happy Soils as the final piece of the puzzle, because I always thought hydroponics and aquaponics would be the way of the future, but if our soil is dead, we're dead. And so I was in the US as part of a showcase of something else, a different product range entirely, and I sat down in this conference I didn't even want to sit in. I was forced into it by a friend of mine who said to me, it was the Regenerative agricultural movement run by Kiss the Ground. And I realise at the moment everything I'm doing is going to be a waste of time and money if we don't fix the soil. We're all dead. And that's quite literally where we're at. It's like, we're going to be all dead if we don't fix the soil. So our farmers are the key to that. And if they continue to lose their farms and we corporatise more and more, then corporations won't change. Big corporations won't change their methodologies unless there's consumer demand. And consumers don't know how to demand for it yet, because there's no way of identifying what is regeneratively grown and what is not, because they recently, under David Littleproud, rejected the regenerative organic standard in this country. We don't have a regenerative organic standard. We've got an organic standard which is under attack at the moment. So, and there's massive demarcation issues between the APVMA and what's organic and what's not. And that doesn't stop the pesticide drift and all the chemicals that are being drifted over, and then they can come in onto your farm and say your farm's contaminated. And they're going to kill your crops and animals. And so, yeah, that's where that one's at.
It's a big journey.
That's why I do it, because at the core of it all, every time humanity has been enslaved, food has been at the core of it. Mussolini, Stalin, Hitler, what do they do first? They went for our farmers first. Control the food supply, control the food supply, control the people. Basically cut out everything else there and just have that bit there. why I started it
Yeah.
was because I don't want to be in a position of slavery.
Yeah, we can put Ukraine under that banner as well. That's why they've been invaded.
Black gold,
Mm-hmm.
black soil.
Mm-hmm. The
And-
breadbasket of
Yep.
the
And
region.
on top of that, they're strategically important location.
Mm.
We as the Western world broke our promise to Russia, to the Soviet Union, that we wouldn't set 1 foot north past the Berlin Wall. And what do? Have 5 waves of expansion. So the more aggressive that we get, the more likely is internationally. That's when you start seeing the trigger points of when the demise happens here, and we're seeing that now with farmers, economics, wage decreases, interest rates going through the roof. We've lost the very principles of what money is about, what the economy is about. And it's pulling something out of the ground that's hard work. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that Melbourne or Victoria had the longest lockdown of the whole of Australia.
All over the world.
In the whole world.
Yeah,
The whole world.
yeah.
Yeah.
You have to think why.
That's a very interesting question. I almost think it was a competition between Andrews and Trudeau as to who could be the best pet to the WEF and the UN. Like who would be the best one? Good boy. It's almost like that because there was, I guess, in Victoria as well, with the way the economy is going, the way the economy is going, so it was a way where Labor could almost cover up their incompetencies. So you knock up another $200 billion worth of debt to the balance sheet. It wasn't us; it was COVID. Why is Daniel Andrews not? Like, why aren't we at this point right now where our government is under enormous scrutiny and a lack of confidence, a vote of no confidence now? Like we are in a diabolical position, and Labor's still the very same group that's going, we don't need an industrial hemp bill. Mate, you guys you pushed us into a $200 billion debt that we can't pay. You don't want an industry that's going to create a $300 billion industry in a year to offset this issue. Yet your logging industry is running at a $260 million loss a year to the taxpayer. So this is what it's about. It's about control. And the very same organisations that control our agriculture control our health industry and control our politicians. That's why they do it.
Right. Yeah, because every regenerative farmer we've spoken to, they've said you would increase the produce, 3 to 5-fold or more just from having healthy soil, and it would increase the economy of Australia.
The economic output of the country.
Yeah.
We would stop being a banana republic. That's what I call this country. We live in a banana republic. We dig shit out of the ground. We send it overseas. We don't even manufacture anymore. Send it overseas. It comes back to us as more expensive product, finished product. Yet our government is pushing on our mining industries. So they're the core of our economy right now. They're the only reason we are still standing. Yet you want to hemorrhage them as well. It's like they're trying to push the country into desperation. And this comes back to the housing market. And why are prices still going up, interest rates going up, and debt is through the roof and people can't pay? Because you need to have a look at the interests of the people that are in federal and state governments. The older people, older men. I don't know if you guys are boomers. You boomers? Should you be baby boomers considered? I don't know.
Absolutely.
So you'd have had properties. You've got properties in your time. It would have been cheaper to buy properties then. But then what happens is, say you're a politician right now, and you have the power in your hand right now to create policy that would increase the unintended consequences would be the increase of pricing, increase the value of your assets, your 5 or 6 properties. What would you do? you'd naturally go, well, that's a good idea, I'm going to do that. So by mass immigration right now, they're looking at their superannuation funds, and their funds going, oh yeah, I've made more money. Who cares about young people? Who cares about the economy? I'm making money on these properties. And soon I'll be able to buy more properties because the price has dropped. Because these guys are foreclosing. So that's where the majority of the issues are. It's a group of people with the same interest creating policies that aren't working for the future of the country.
No doubt.
Yeah. And on that,
Yeah.
I'd just be quick.
Yeah.
I always ask my guests, if there was one thing you could do to change the world, what would that be?
Nothing. We're exactly where we're supposed to be in time and space right now. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. Because if you change something now, if we change probably one thing throughout human history, Hitler. I'd make sure Hitler never existed. Because that's where Bayer came from, the chemicals. That's where it all started in terms of the chemical industrial revolution like that. A lot of the technology was German based, and from Hitler's war arsenal. So a lot of the technology has been generated now has been generated because of World War II. I would eliminate Hitler and change the timeline completely.
Cool. And on a different note, what is your wellness go-to? One thing that you really have to do to stay well?
Far out. Right. At the moment, it's usually training.
Okay.
I usually will jump in the ring and train, but at the moment it's been a little bit chaotic. Everything that's going on in companies and everything, but it's usually it's training and I'd say pray. I won't deny the fact that I pray and I go to church and I believe in Jesus, which I'll always say very proudly. I pray. That's where I find centre and answers.
Great. So thank you so much for being on the show today. And I shall share your happysoils.com.au website, and if people, especially farmers, are in debt and if you're in need of change and money, please reach out to Andrew.
Done. Awesome. Appreciate it.